from Navy Pier in Chicago to the Superman statue in Metropolis and everything in between. We'll be hearing the stories from the troopers in their own words. The who, why, and what led them to the Illinois State Police and what they've experienced since then. Without further ado, this is Peak Beneath the Peak with your host, Chief Public Information Officer Beth Hunsdorfer and Southern Deputy PIO, Sergeant Joey Watson.
This is our next installment of the Peak Beneath the Peak. We have Beth Hunsdorfer, the Chief Public Information Officer with you, and Joey Watson with the Public Information Office also. And today, our guest, Jamie Brunnworth.
Hey, Jamie. Well, thanks for having me.
Well, we're just going to ask you a few things about your career, your life, what you do, and give everybody a little view of your day. Could you kind of take us through what a day looks like for you?
Well, I work violent crime investigations right now. I just switched positions. So a normal day would be going into the office, and if we get a new case, it would be responding to that case and following up on leads and trying to investigate the crime that we're looking at right at the time. And if we don't have a new case that comes in, it's going to be following up on old cases that we've been working on.
But you've actually been doing this for quite a while, though, haven't you? You said you came back out of, you switched positions. You did the same thing before for a while?
Yes. In 2009, I went to investigations, and I worked homicide investigations until the beginning of this year. I switched positions for about 10 months, and now I'm back.
Okay, all right. So you're out of the Collinsville area? Is that where you're based out of?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you're working homicides in the East St. Louis area, basically.
Well, I was, and this new unit that I just moved to last week is going to be working all non-fatal violent crimes in East St. Louis.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's called PSEG, a Public Safety Enforcement Group. It's a new unit. We really just started kicking off this week with taking cases.
Oh, okay. So we're on the leading edge of this thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess, can you kind of take us through, when you have so much violent crime in a place, and you have a homicide rate that's kind of one of the highest in the nation in East St. Louis, why the focus on things other than homicides?
Well, there is a lot of violent crime in East St. Louis, and unfortunately, East St. Louis Police Department is very low on their manpower, and they just don't have the resources to work all of those non-fatal crimes as well as the homicides. So there is a lot of lower-end crimes like aggravated batteries, like maybe somebody was shot but didn't die, or aggravated domestic assaults. We've had sexual assaults, and just because of the lack of manpower, they're just not given the proper attention. So we're hoping that to be able to step in and with our resources to be able to help East St. Louis detectives investigate these cases and hopefully lead to charges and getting some of these individuals off the street, and maybe that'll even help in reducing the homicide rate down there.
And this really isn't something new necessarily that the state police do. Like, one of the things that one of our core mission statements is we provide resources to local police departments and sheriff's departments. So this is really just an extension of that.
Yes, ISP has been assisting East St. Louis with homicides for decades. I mean, we've been providing that assistance, but we've never really focused on the non-fatal cases. So this is going to be focused more on, like I said, the non-fatal violent crime, which there is a ton of that in East St. Louis, and we're hoping that with our added resources, we can get some cases pushed through the court system and get some individuals off the street.
Right, and kind of have that trickle-down effect. That's great. Outstanding.
Well, how did you come to serve in East St. Louis, and how did you come to work homicides through your career? Was it something you were always drawn to, or?
When I started with ISP, I mean, my end game was always to go into investigations. I always wanted to do something along the lines of investigative work. When I was in college, I didn't necessarily want to be a sworn officer, but I didn't know how to make it to that point. And when I was doing my internship in Springfield, my coordinator worked for the local sheriff's department, and he kind of convinced me, like, if you really want to work these types of, violent crime type cases, you're going to have to be a sworn police officer. And he's like, if you're going to do it, go big and put in for ISP. So I did. I was doing my internship and I put in for ISP and I got hired on, and I did patrol for 3 years, and I didn't think I would enjoy that, but I really actually loved it. I love patrol. It's, something new every shift. You see different things and you meet different people, and it's not monotonous in any way, and it just opens your eyes to a lot of different things. But my end game was always wanting to do investigative work. So when some positions came open in 2009, I had put in for the zone where I reside, which would be Zone 6 Collinsville, and I got hired on in a position there in our general criminal unit, and a few months later they actually converted us all to violent crime units that handled homicides. So within the first 6 months I was already working homicides.
And you're also part of the Child Death Investigation Task Force, is that correct?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, because I would think that investigating infant and children deaths would be really hard on your stress.
Yes, I look at them two different ways. Child death investigations are most certainly the hardest cases to work, and emotionally sometimes you have to keep yourself in check because they're extremely sad cases. You have a truly innocent victim, and they're complicated cases because you usually know there's a few people that could have injured the child because they're only around a limited number of people, but it can be very complicated to prove who was the person that actually hurt and killed the child. So it can be difficult cases, and then like I said, emotionally it can be difficult to see a child like that, especially myself that's a young mother. Some of those cases do get to me. However, while I say that I think that these cases motivate me the most because they are truly innocent victims, and if nobody else is going to work these cases, I want to give them everything I have to solve this case, because I know, and this is like the most heinous crime to me, is anything where you could harm a child. So I want to do my best work going out there. I want to have my best resources and my best guys working these cases. So like I said, it's hard, but they motivate me the most.
And you're a mom also, aren't you?
Yes, I have 2 small girls.
Wow. How does that impact your, like, when you go onto a case and you're sitting there looking at a child that is similar in age, how does that impact you emotionally?
It does. I mean, I think any officer would be lying if they said it didn't. When, especially victims who are around the same age as your child, you definitely can picture your child being in that situation and go through the motions and the thoughts of, like, how would I deal with this if I was the mother? How would I be if this was my child sitting here? So it is harder, and like I said, there have been a few cases in my career with the Child Death Investigative Task Force that really bothered me, and I think most of those were, one time we had a child that died in a house fire that was 4, a little girl, and my daughter was 4 at the time, and that one just kind of really bothered me.
Sure.
We had another one, a little boy that died, and he was only 6 months old, and my daughter was 6 months old. So it just, seeing him in the hospital, knowing he was going to die, that really gets to me because I feel helpless. I know, he's still alive, but I know he's brain dead and he's not going to survive, and I feel helpless that I can't do anything to fix him. But then it motivates me to know that there is something I can do, and that's bring justice for his family and hold whoever did this responsible for what they did to him to cause him to be there.
Right. Wow, that's really neat. I think that's really an important key to the state police that nobody really realizes is out there. That's neat. So this task force, is it state police centered, or is it a conglomeration of people?
The Child Death Task Force?
Yes.
Yes, it's all local departments, sheriff's departments, state police. We also have people, investigators from the coroner's office, from DCFS. It's multi-jurisdictional. It's basically whoever within the counties that the Child Death Investigative Task Force falls within, whoever within those county wants to be a part of it, you just apply, and then the board will decide whether or not you'll be a part of it.
So again, this is kind of that partnership with local entities.
Yes.
Building relationships and building communities in essence.
And
Yes.
don't they kind of take those and look at them as if they're a case study? for training DCFS and like their processes, do they use those? Do law enforcement use those as far as like, hey, we had a case like that, maybe we should take it this way? Do you reflect back on those for training or?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think of cases that we've worked in the past and things that we should have done differently and things that we've learned from. And then that helps with training, with moving forward when we do host trainings for the Child Death Task Force, different things that we can do differently, especially with like co-sleeping deaths when we have unsafe sleep type environment. There are things that we've obviously learned, especially in recent years, about those types of cases. And through that, we've provided training, like when you respond on scene, you should do X, Y, and Z kind of thing.
Well, and I know our office, the Public Information Office, has worked with the task force, and we've put out messaging to prevent some of those co-sleeping incidents as well. So also the work that you're doing is serving as an educational component as well to the community. So that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's neat.
Can we kind of back up and talk about why you got into law enforcement?
Why?
Very good question.
It was a
I'm
dark and
asking
stormy
myself
night.
that every day.
You know, when I was young, I actually always wanted to be an attorney. I always wanted to be a lawyer, and it has to be something within the criminal justice field. I don't know what it is, but I'm drawn to it. And for the longest time, that's what I wanted to do until I was a senior in high school. And I actually shadowed a law firm, and I thought, I should have shadowed a criminal law firm. It was like a real estate law firm. And I was like doing everything I could to stay awake, and I was listening and thinking, oh my God, this is god awful. I cannot do this with my life. And then as I went into college, kind of like, well, I want to do something with investigative type work, but I don't want to be, law enforcement. And I think my fear of law enforcement was just, I'd never pictured myself wearing a uniform and making traffic stops and that kind of thing. But I think as time went on and I did my internship with an agency that investigated employees for things like, taking 2-hour lunches and ghost payrolling and things like that. And I just realized, like, while I agree that there needs to be somebody out there that investigates that type of stuff, I thought, that's not me. I want to be part of something bigger. I want to investigate something that matters in people's lives, that affects them, like violent crime. I wanted to be able to truly help somebody, and I felt like, getting somebody punished because they took twice as long on their lunch break, that wasn't going to satisfy me. I wanted to be able to be out in the field and helping victims. I'm very victim focused and victim centered. I want to be involved. If we have a sexual assault victim, I want to be the one that goes in and talks to them and tries to help them through that and provide any assistance that I can, if I can. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's what motivates me. That's what gets me going. So I think in the end I knew that I had to go the sworn route. And like I said, I was very hesitant about being a sworn officer, but once I became a road trooper, I loved it. And I thought, why was I so hesitant of this? I enjoyed working midnights and making traffic stops, and I really did love that world.
One of my side gigs for the state police is recruitment, and we often get that question. People walk up and say, well, I'd really like to investigate, or I'd really like to do a CSI position, but they have that fear. And so how did you work yourself through that fear? Like, it's a common thought with people that are looking at law enforcement, but they don't feel like they can make that leap. So how did it look for you?
Well, I just, I was young. I was 22, and I was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to see where it goes. and I put in, and like the entire time, maybe not the entire time, but initially in the academy, I kept asking myself over and over again, is this really what I want? Like, I could quit today and go back to my old job. But I'm not a quitter, and I don't like being a quitter, and I thought, no, I'm going to see this through. And also growing up, my uncle was a detective for a sheriff's office up in Michigan, and I can remember growing up listening to all of his stories of all of the insane things that he investigated and the people that he dealt with. And I mean, I just always thought it was so neat. And then the way that he talked about it, police officers are very, what's the word I'm looking about? Like, they find the humor in things, even in horrible situations, because you have to deal with it in some way. And I
Yes.
can remember being young, listening him talk about these horrible things, and like him somehow finding the humor in it and making a joke, thinking, is this man lost his mind, kind of thing.
Right.
But listening to his stories always captivated me. So when I was going through, I'd called him a couple times. He's like, don't quit, kind of thing. And I just couldn't bring myself to quit. I'm like, nope, I'm going to see this through and see where it goes. And then when I graduated and got into the district, and going through 6 months of the academy kind of changes your mindset on it anyways. It prepares you for going out there in the field. So I wasn't really nervous or hesitant because I kind of knew what to expect. I knew what I was getting myself into. And then when I got out into the district and I met all the people and I started going out and making traffic stops and working, I just kind of found my jive, and I didn't really have that hesitation anymore. And so whenever I do talk to potential applicants or like people at the recruiting events, I've heard that question as well.
Right.
I tell them, I was the same way, but you know what? You may get in there and you may find that you love patrol, because I had a great time on patrol. Like, I don't think I could do it now in my age with my kids, go back to working midnights, but working midnights was one of the most fun times I've had with ISP, because you just see so much crazy stuff in the middle of the night while everybody else is sleeping.
Yeah, right.
So I always tell them, like, give it a chance. And I'm like, patrol may not be your thing, and you'll do it for a couple years, and then you can move on to other aspects.
Right.
And I try to explain that to everybody, that, while we are all troopers and we will all start out in that fashion, it may not be your end game, and that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You may move on to something else.
Yeah, you've got 25 or 30 years to think about it. So, yeah, and there's a lot to do in our agency.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the really cool aspects.
So can you kind of give us the what's the best part of your job and what is the worst part of your job?
For sure, in all of these years, I would say for sure the worst part of my job has always been doing death notifications. Obviously, going to family and telling them that their loved one has died is the worst thing that you could, other than being on the receiving end of it, it's just a horrible experience. I also do, though, I do like to be there for that, because it makes me more connected. If I'm the case agent and I'm going to be, investigating this person's homicide, it makes me more connected to meet with the family and have that. I can't really explain it. I wouldn't say it's like a bond, but to be there and to kind of get that connection with them from them.
Maybe to understand them as a person
Yes.
instead of just
Yes, to understand them when they're going through this horrific time. It pushes me then in my investigation to work harder and to do better. I would say the best part then would be the ending of that, is when you get justice for a family or for a victim, if you have a victim that has survived. And by that I mean, you've gotten your suspect in custody and maybe they've taken a plea or they've gone to trial and they've been found guilty. Like, for me, that is the ultimate end game. I mean, obviously we want offenders to be rehabilitated and to eventually make their way back out and be productive citizens. But when you have violent offenders that do something horrible to a victim, and then there's either the victim still alive or you have the surviving family, like, to be able to be there with them when they know that this person is going to be held accountable for their actions is a really great feeling, and to know that you helped provide that justice and that closure to them is a good feeling on my end. So I would also say the other horrible part of the job would be when you don't make it to that end game, and when you're not able to get charges, or you do and it goes to trial and you lose at trial. That is I've been there a few times, and to be with the family when we get a not guilty verdict is a horrible experience, and it feels like you failed them and that you didn't work hard enough and you didn't do your job like you should have, because they should be they should have gotten their justice here, and now they didn't, because the person's walking out the door.
There's got to be a ton of times where you know who did it, but you can't get it to charges.
Yeah, and that actually happens quite a lot. We have, I would say, more than half of the cases. I would say 3/4 of the cases, at least, that I've worked in my career, we've had a suspect, and I know that this person is guilty. I know that they did it, but I don't have the evidence to back it up. And that really is horrible too. And I've had, family members call me every couple months, every year, and ask me, what's the status of this case? It's 6 years old, and I'm like, I'm sorry, there's nothing. We have no new leads. There's no tips that have come in. I believe we know who the suspect is, but I just can't prove that, and that I hate having to tell family that.
And I think that's one of the state police's core values, though, is the integrity of that investigation. When you look at an investigation, if you can't build the case properly and get it done right, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of important to point out that that's not a bad thing. We certainly want the justice. We certainly want to push through and get our job done. But if you can't get there to that level, then we can't force it through.
Yes, and I completely agree with that, and that's something that that's why we're always going out there, and we're putting things on Crime Stoppers and cold cases on our website, hoping that somebody, because somebody knows something.
Right.
We just don't know who that someone is, and they haven't come forward. So we're always hoping that somebody out there will come forward and we'll get that information, and then hopefully be able to bring that case back to life and get some new evidence to get charges on it.
And kind of bringing that full circle with your current position, this is really a lot to do with community relations in the East St. Louis area. And
Absolutely.
So one of the big components of your job is having that interaction with the public and getting that trust so that they're able to give you those leads that you need to work these cases. So how important is that in your new gig?
Oh, it's huge. And that's like one of the huge components of this. And actually with our PSEG unit, we're going to be housed out of East St. Louis PD. So we're going to be there in the city. We're going to be available. People come in, they need assistance, they have information, they want to report a crime. We're right there to be able to help them from the minute one. So I'm hoping that with us being there within the East St. Louis Police Department, that the community will feel like they can come to us, and maybe that'll eventually start opening up the floodgates of these individuals that have information on older cases that have never come forward, and maybe we'll touch them in a different way, like a different case. And by being in contact with them on this case, I don't know if we should remove the touch. Sorry, I didn't mean it like that.
Can maybe connect.
Yeah, connect. Yeah.
Oh, shoot. I was like, I can't go on, I gotta bring that up.
But you have probably been, because I just am dying to ask, you've probably had some pretty decent confessions come to you in this room.
Yeah, I've had, a few. Mm-hmm.
Is there like one that you could not, well, even if they're convicted, like, is there one that kind of sticks out in your mind that you were just like, the other shoe drops and you, like, inside you're going, yes.
We had a child death investigation a few years back, and we had 2 suspects in custody, and with that one we did not, and I interviewed both of them, and I did not get a full confession, but I got enough confession from the main suspect to be able to get charges. She had talked about the abuse that she had done on the child, wouldn't necessarily push herself to the fact that she killed him, but enough that you could insinuate that she had killed him. And to me, again, working child death cases, that is like my end game, to be able to get her to the point that she was comfortable enough with me to tell me what she had done to this child, and to then move the case forward and get charges and her go to prison. That for me is the ultimate,
Right.
I can't think of a good word for it. It's just the satisfaction, the ultimate satisfaction to be working a case like this.
That's awesome.
I think the part of your job that would make me the most nervous would be going to testify, because you have some really great defense attorneys that could just pick up, like, I don't know how detectives do it, or even forensic people get up there, because, I mean, you have to remember every little thing you wrote down.
Yeah.
And not deviate from it at all, even though you could expound on it, you could, things change, evolve. That would just make me, I think that would be my most nerve. Is that your...
I mean, with testifying, Normally when I get on the stand, I'm initially nervous for the first minute or two. And then once we get into a groove, then I'm more comfortable. I think it's just the aspect of getting up there and everybody looking at me and everything. Right. And you know, one thing I will say about defense attorneys, and I've testified a lot, especially in St. Clair County in my career, they have made me better, because there's a lot of things that I've learned from testifying that I'm like, okay, next time I'm going to do this, next time I'm going to do that. Like, they picked apart something that I know in my head was a waste of time and it didn't need to be done. Like, maybe it was a lead that came in that was useless, and I knew I would get nothing from the case. However, a defense attorney picked it up and then drilled me for 30 minutes about why I didn't follow up on this lead, knowing full well it had not, it wasn't going anywhere. But I know that it's something that, because it's in the case file, I should have touched on it. So there's so many times, like with training these new agents that are coming in, that they ask those questions, like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Well, we do that so when we go to court, right. You don't get drilled on the stand. And also with, like, a huge thing is documentation. A lot of our newer guys aren't very detailed in the reports. And I am really big on, you need to be detailed, because when you take that stand, and it's usually going to be 2 years after the fact, they're going to be asking you very specific questions. And if you didn't document it, chances are you're not going to remember it. So, yes, testifying, it can be frustrating with defense attorneys, because to me, it's all a show. You know what I mean? It's a show for the jury. It's not reality. It's not reality of what I actually did in my investigation. It's not a comprehensive look at what my investigation looks like. It's just the pieces that the prosecution and the defense have decided can be presented. You know what I mean? So that's why I say it's a show. That part frustrates me, because a jury doesn't get the complete picture of an investigation. They only get those little pieces that are decided that can be shown. But while we're talking about that, I did have a funny story about testifying in trial. And we had a homicide case that involved two brothers, and they were both there, but just the one brother had actually shot and killed two people, and the other brother, who was not the shooter, had eventually provided a statement against him. And we charged the one brother, the shooter, with the two homicides, and the other brother, we didn't charge him, and short time later he had actually been shot in another incident, and he was paralyzed. And we had to, for the trial of his brother, we had to bring him in on a stretcher, actually, because he was confined to a wheelchair, and because of his health, because of what had happened to him, we had to have him on a stretcher. And of course, going into trial, he did not want to testify against his brother, and here he is on stretcher. It was a very unique situation. So as it's his turn to go in, and we sat with him, actually myself and a couple guys picked up the brother that was in the wheelchair 3 days that week and drove him up to the courthouse, got him on a stretcher, wheeled him in, and so we sat with him for 3 days, and finally on the third day it was his time to go into the courtroom. And finally when he came in, I think his brother, the defendant, did not want him testifying, and then eventually we came to a plea deal, like right in the middle of trial. We stopped trial, we came to a plea deal, and that was kind of it. So they brought this all in for him to do his plea, and his brother's still sitting in the middle of the courtroom on the stretcher, which I thought was really strange. And so he agrees to plead guilty and whatnot, and then as they're like in court and judges walking out, they start wheeling out his brother, and then the defendant starts yelling at him, "Hey man, I love you, brother, I love you." And the brother's like, "Love you too, bro." And then the defendant's like, "Hey, by the way, put $200 on my books so I can buy a TV." And he's like, "I got you, bro."
No hard feelings on it. Yeah.
It was just one of those surreal experiences. Like, he's gonna testify against you, and the defense had made their argument was that the one on the stretcher was actually our shooter. So like they were pinning it against each other, and the defense had created this whole circus, about defense said it was the one brother, that brother said no, it was him. It was this whole circus, and then at the end, like for them just be like, "Love you, brother," and then the last request, hey, put $200 on my books for a TV. He's like, got you. I was just like, what is going on
The
here?
blood is
Peace out.
thicker than water. Definitely. Yeah. So,
Yeah, so I really enjoy it and appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you, Jamie. There's a lot of untold stories in the ISP and things that people don't understand about being a police officer, and so your career is really a classic case of, I don't know if I want to do this, turned into a success story, turned into awesome motivation, and now you're getting back out into the community and serving. So
I've got to say, she's got a very
Yeah.
sunny disposition.
Yeah.
Homicide detective.
Yeah, right?
That's the most surprising thing. Like, she's this very. Are you by nature a positive person, or?
I think so. And I will say I worked homicides for 9 years, and then, well, I guess actually I worked homicides for about 10 and a half years, and then I was kind of convinced to take a position in an admin role, which I did for the last 10 months. And I think when that change happened, like, I was ready for a change, and I was burnout, and I wouldn't say, I'd just say burnout. So having that change was nice. But then getting into the administrative world, I kind of realized, like, this isn't what motivates me. This isn't what makes me love my job. Like,
Right.
Yes, there should be somebody here to do this work, but I want to be the one in the field, dealing with the public and working with victims and talking to people. Like, that's what I enjoy doing. So when this opportunity came up about going to this new public safety enforcement group, I was, of course, on board. Like, while I liked my job doing administrative work, I knew that's not where my heart was,
Right.
and I knew that's not where I wanted to be. So part of it is I'm just got a positive disposition, and the other part is I've had 10 months off to kind of
Raring to go.
to recharge your batteries.
recharge myself.
And do your daughters understand what you do? Do they understand what mom's job is?
Not really, and it's actually kind of funny because my husband is also a state trooper, and he's on patrol and he wears a uniform, so they see him in uniform all the time, and so they think nothing of it. But anytime I put on my uniform, which is not very often, like, they laugh, like, mommy's not supposed to be wearing that, but yet they know I'm a police officer. But, like, I don't look like one because I don't wear a uniform, so, like, I don't think they can really tell a difference, and I don't necessarily think they know what I do, and it's kind of hard to explain to them.
Do you think you'll share more with them as they get older?
Oh, of course,
Yeah.
yeah. Right now they're 5 and 7, so it's kind of
Oh,
hard.
you're in ways,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's hard to explain, and, like, all they know is Daddy pulls people over and writes speeding tickets and
Right.
things like that. So they, of course, you got to keep it very innocent with kids.
Right.
So they do know I'm a police officer, but, like, it's funny because they look at me and my husband very differently
Yeah.
as far as the work goes.
Yeah. Well, I maybe. Do you hope one of them follows in your footsteps?
Ooh, I don't know.
I know, right?
I
Yeah.
don't know. My 7-year-old keeps saying that she wants to be a police officer, but I don't think she understands what it really means, and she is so sensitive. I'm like, I don't know if that's a world she could live in.
Right. Yeah, you gotta have pretty thick skin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
My name is Jamie Brunnworth, and there's your peak beneath the peak.